our topic. We all love trees and we all need our trees. They shade us, they cool the city, they provide recreational benefits, and we all love the trees in our city. And this lecture will provide an overview of the city's tree planting and stewardship programs and highlight key initiatives, pilot projects, and the results of recent tree survival studies. Kim will examine the health and maintenance of the urban tree canopy within the context of intensification pressures and competing infrastructure needs. The presentation will also explore the city's approach to native species selection and the use of locally sourced seed stock as part of its long-term strategy for urban forest resilience. So now I'm really delighted to introduce Kim Statham, who's the Director of Urban Forestry for the City of Toronto. She brings more than 25 years of experience in municipal leadership and leads one of Canada's largest urban forestry programs. And it focuses on planning, protecting, expanding Toronto's tree canopy. Kim is committed to advancing tree equity, climate resilience through nature-based solutions, and strengthening connections between people and nature. She serves as the Ontario Region representative for the Canadian Urban Forest Network and is an elected board member of the International Society of Arboriculture Ontario chapter and represents Toronto on Parks Canada's Rouge National Urban Park Advisory Committee. Kim actively supports leadership development in the conservation sector through various mentorship initiatives, including Project Learning Tree and the Young Conservation Professionals Program. She holds a Master's of Environmental Studies from York University and has an honors Bachelor of Environmental Science from the University of Guelph. Kim, we're so delighted to have you and really are looking forward to your presentation. And I will now turn it over to you.
Thank you, Philip. That was such a nice, warm welcome, and I'm so happy to be here. I was so delighted to get the invite and to collaborate together on a good topic for the lecture tonight. And wonderful, of course, to see lots of familiar names that have tuned in. So hello to everyone I've met and hello to everyone else who's joined tonight and looking forward to a good chat and a good discussion. So I am going to share my screen. If I can, Philip or Robert, would you mind just letting me know if you can see the full screen of the title slide? Oh, right about now. How's that?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you. So delighted to be here tonight to talk a little bit about the role of Toronto's tree canopy in urban resilience. We're going to focus on, as Philip noted, let me just get the right button here. We're going to focus on a couple of things through this agenda. So we're going to talk a little bit about Toronto's urban forest and the tree canopy study data and what's coming next for our next study. Of course, if you live in Toronto, if you're familiar with Toronto, if you visit, you'll be aware of a lot of development and intensification pressures. And there's a couple that I'll focus on tonight that we've seen over the last 10 years and we're certainly experiencing now. I want to talk a little bit about the tree bylaws that regulate trees in Toronto and some achievements we recently made through a council report just a few months ago. Then, as Philip said, I'm going to focus on our tree planting and stewardship programs and focus on a couple of key initiatives. Hopefully, you'll get a couple of good takeaways tonight, and then we'll open it up for a discussion. So just to kind of frame the value of Toronto's urban forest, according to our last tree canopy study from 2018, Toronto has approximately 11.5 million trees in Toronto. 45% of those are on public property and 55% are located on private property. Toronto's urban forest has a $7 billion structural value. That means if everything was gone and we needed to replace it, which of course isn't possible, but since we can quantify that, it would take $7 billion to replace Toronto's urban forest. It provides $55 million annually in ecological services, and I'll break that down in a couple of slides. Something of interest is we look to the tools where we can quantify the value of urban forests. A TD study came out after our last Canopy study that said for every dollar spent on annual maintenance, Toronto's urban forest returns between 1.35 and $3.20 worth of benefits and cost savings each year. That is reflective of health benefits, recreational benefits, ecological benefits. And that I think is such an interesting and provocative data point to talk about the value of investment that we put into Toronto each year. We know that healthy tree canopy can increase property values by 5 to 10%. And of course, we know tree canopy can reduce that urban heat island effect and urban heat by approximately 9 degrees Celsius, depending on the location that you're in and experiencing that. And just to put a bit of perspective on it, I found a stat that said one large tree can provide a day's worth of oxygen for 4 people. So I often think of Toronto's urban forest as kind of punching above its weight in terms of those ecological, cultural, social, and economic benefits. So here's a canopy map of what Toronto looks like. And I'll just take this moment to note that we were really excited about these stats in 2018 and 2019, which is when we did our last tree canopy study. They're feeling a little old. We're already at 2026. And because of that, we are already planning our next tree canopy study. So the stats that I'm about to share over the next few slides are about 8 years old, but they are what we have at this time. And certainly we'll be looking to do that next study to look at the next 10 and 20-year trends once we get that data back. But for now, that's what I'll be highlighting tonight. So this is a canopy map of Toronto for any folks who are familiar with the geography of the city. You won't be surprised by the location of the darkest green. I'm not sure if you can see my cursor, but for folks who are not familiar with Toronto, we have our the three major watersheds. We have 6 watersheds that run through the city, but 3 major. So we have the Humber River that runs through this area, and you can see that is represented by these various colors. Of course, we have the Don River that runs down through the center of the city, and then of course Rouge River that runs in the east. And so it's no surprise that where we have our ravines, valleys, natural areas, it is correlated by seeing the highest distribution of canopy cover. To break this down to give you a bit of an indication then of what parts of the city are the highest and the lowest. On the left side is Ward 25. This is Scarborough Rouge Park. This you can see, and I apologize, I know the legends are pretty small, but Scarborough Rouge Park has approximately 47% tree canopy cover in this ward. You can see from the colors, the dark green, the light green, this is all permeable tree, shrub, and grass layers. Where you'll notice the red, that's buildings, gray, that kind of light brown. These tend to be impermeable surfaces, but you get a sense there. And of course, you can see the Rouge River running through this and towards Rouge National Urban Park, up toward the upper right side of Ward 25. So let's compare that with Ward 10, Spadina Fort York. Right off the bat, you can really see it's kind of a switch out of colors here. Ward 10 has approximately 15% tree canopy cover in this ward. You can see the dominant colors are the gray and the red. This is Toronto's most dense downtown core, so no surprise there to anyone. There's not a lot of green space. You can see a couple of our key parks, Ontario Place. You can see, I think that's Trinity Bellwoods, excuse me, in the top left, and some of those connecting parks as well. So this is a ward where we're really interested in that park and that green space connectivity, but it is mostly dominated by buildings, roads, and other impermeable surfaces. So we conducted our first tree canopy study in 2008, and we did the second in 2018. It's a common industry standard at that time to do canopy studies every 10 years. So we had our first set of 10-year trends. In 2008, we had roughly 10.2 million trees. And an equivalent canopy cover of it was a bit of a range. This graphic just has the lower range. Excuse me for a sec. So the canopy range in 2008 was roughly 26.6 to 28.1%. In 2018, that increased to 11.5 million trees and a canopy cover from 28.4 to roughly 31% canopy cover. As I noted on the earlier slide, the annual ecosystem services provided by Toronto's Urban Forest is $55 million annually. And this is broken down by the graphic that you can see on your right between energy savings, gross carbon sequestration, pollution removal, and avoided runoff. All very important and critical ecological services that Toronto's Urban Forest as our critical component of the city's natural and green infrastructure provides, supporting the quality of life and what we need to make Toronto a livable and a sustainable city. What we saw in 2018 was a bit of a deep dive then into our street tree population. Street trees make a significant contribution to the urban forest because a lot of the time they are also in the harshest growing environments. The areas where we see urban heat island be the highest, a lot of trees in hard surface, in sidewalks, next to roads, etc. While the street tree population makes up about 5.4% of the population. It represents about 19% of the structural value across the entire urban forest. What we noted in 2018 is that we did see an increase of street trees in good or excellent condition. And we saw a decrease, corresponding decrease in trees that were in fair or poor. At that time, that was directly correlated to City Council increasing our watering and maintenance budgets. No surprise to anyone on this call that trees need water after they're planted to survive, and that was a direct correlation. And when I talk about the survival study a little later in the presentation, I'll talk about what we have found correlated with our newly planted tree maintenance program as well. This is a figure talking about, this is street trees by size class. So in 2000, what you can see on the bottom bars is 2008, 2018, and then what the ideal size class is. And what this is really representing is, in an ideal scenario, you have all of these different size classes contributing to an urban forest. Under natural and human pressures, obviously trees die, decline, and need to be replaced by younger trees. And so we want to see a pretty good distribution of that size class so that as urban forests grow, we always have that size class. First of all, to provide those ecological services. For example, older trees are better at storing carbon, but younger trees are better at sequestering carbon. So these are the things that we want to see. So above that, you can see the trends then between 2008 and 2018 in terms of trying to get toward that ideal. And I won't steal my own thunder yet, but I have a direct connection to something that we just achieved through our bylaw report that is specifically related to size class. On the left, this is interesting for me. What this is showing is that at the same time that impervious surfaces were increasing, so a land cover change between 1999 and 2018, so roughly about 20 years. The same time that impervious surfaces were increasing, we saw pervious surfaces decreasing. That sounds like a truism, like they obviously go hand in hand, but we use two different measurement tools to look at the relationship of impervious and the relationship with pervious. And so to see this increase and decrease at the same time was of great concern. Using two different tools, basically telling us the same thing, that we were losing growing space, we're losing plantable space, and that land area was being converted to non-permeable or impervious surface. That was very informative for some of the interventions that we needed to do and have been doing. The figure on the right is just giving you a sense then of where across different land use patterns we were seeing that change in Canopy. So the blue is Canopy in 2009, 2008, 2009, and the green is Canopy in 2018. So you can see, we made gains in open spaces. No surprise there. We have a very aggressive planting program. We would see then some decreases in, for example, in commercial areas. This is a scenario where I just described where a lot of our street trees grow and have a difficult time growing because it is among the hardest growing environments in an urban environment. So finally, this is noting where we have the potential to expand the urban forest. So really, if you look at this chart, the only areas here that are on public land where the city has a direct influence on where we can increase trees would be the parks. So down here at 24%, a little bit in the utility and transportation sector. So our city's right-of-ways where we can plant trees in residential areas or commercial areas. But by and large, the rest is all private property, single family residential, multifamily residential, and then industrial, institutional, and other green spaces that are not necessarily owned or directly managed by the City of Toronto. So this told us a lot about how we maybe need to start influencing or supporting tree planting on private land, and I'll get into that in a minute. Okay, so as I said, I picked two key kind of challenges to focus on tonight that are reflective of the tree canopy data. And they're certainly reflective of what we're experiencing as Torontonians, or for some folks who are visitors or are aware of what's happening in Toronto. So the first challenge, really, I kind of summarized as development and intensification pressures. This is something experienced by all cities in urban environments. Toronto, maybe we're not unique, but certainly in an environment where we are the largest city in Canada, the fourth fastest growing city in North America. We have a housing crisis. We are trying to actively improve our transit and transportation network. We're certainly feeling this. So a couple of things just to point out. For development, for housing, for infill, for new large developments, we see a lot of private tree injury and removal. And I've noted it here as of right construction or C of A approved variances. And what that means is that under Provincial Planning Act and related to provincial zoning, any parcel of land has an allowable, developable footprint on that property, and that is general. This is my layperson's terms. Certainly not a city planner, as you can tell, but a kind of a plain definition of what as of right means. It means that the property owner has the right to develop that developable land. And that is either achieved just through the zoning bylaw in Toronto or when applicants go to the Committee of Adjustment for variances on various things. Because city bylaws are not applicable law, it means we cannot supersede provincial zoning rights. And so we cannot prevent, for example, a removal of a tree. What we can do is work with applicants to try to maximize retention And then certainly maximize compensation that we would be getting. There's a couple of exceptions to that. And I'll touch on it lightly, but one of those is the expanding housing options in neighborhoods. So you might be familiar with laneways or garden suites or multiplex. We do have a specific restrictive policy where we may deny tree permits to allow for that form of housing. We also incorporated that recently into some achievements on our bylaw review, which I will save until we get to that slide. The other thing that we see would be related to street trees and consequences of construction and design and specifically driveways. This isn't happening rampantly through the city, but interesting to note in terms of the neighborhoods you live in and when you see first of all a development, but then that kind of those access points and the infrastructure around that development, we can see that that happening as well. We monitor for unpermitted injury or removal of city-owned street trees and private trees, otherwise known as infractions. So we have a compliance and enforcement team. We have recently strengthened some of their tools as well. But that is something that has been making the news lately. And, certainly we're putting all of our efforts and coordinating our efforts with our colleagues in Toronto Building, municipal licensing and standards, as well as development and growth services to make sure that we are doing all we can to first educate, but then to enforce the various bylaws. The last bullet really just kind of notes that there's a lot happening in Toronto right now as a result of development and intensification pressures. I've noted it as kind of unprecedented tree removal, so probably goes without saying, but there is a lot of transit expansion happening in Toronto right now. Much needed transit infrastructure, no question, in terms of increasing those options for Torontonians and visitors. But we are, as a result of that, seeing a lot of tree removals to accommodate that construction. In these scenarios, my transit team work very closely with applicants. And again, looking to modify, to mitigate those impacts. We have had some big success. Applications that, maybe come in with large number of tree removals and with some creative and willing design alternatives. We have had success at retaining and protecting trees. These are trees in natural areas and along other rights of ways to try to retain as much as we can. This is an area where I say when our bylaws cannot prevent the removal or injury of trees, the one good thing that the bylaws incorporate is a requirement to compensate for those losses. In natural areas, we're piloting an area-based compensation ratio. And in other scenarios, we are looking at, strengthening as much as we can those compensation. There are scenarios where that could actually be helpful. A lot of in some of our natural areas, we may see a high percentage of invasive species, for example, or non-native species. This, in many cases, has given us an opportunity to improve a replanting plan of native species, increasing biodiversity, increasing support for pollinators, wildlife. So it's not ideal. But there are a couple of tools that are at our disposal where we can look to retain and or improve some of those outcomes. The second challenge would be around growing space. Again, going back to that, the impervious-pervious data point. We are seeing loss of growing space, first just to accommodate net new tree plantings, but also related to soil quality and quantity to support tree growth. We also see difficulties in realizing replacement trees. There's a lot of competition for space, both above and below grade. We work with our colleagues to find good ways forward. But there is no question that there's finite space and there's a lot of competition, especially in road right of ways, where a lot of infrastructure needs to be accommodated, both gray and green. And so we do our best to realize the ability to plant trees in these scenarios. And then just a point to say the loss of permeable space, it's not just an issue with losing trees, losing net opportunities to replant trees, and to replace tree canopy, but also for surface water absorption. So lots of areas around the city where flooding is a concern, and so thinking of that. That term of a spongy city, I'm fascinated by that approach and how easy it is to understand a spongy city when we are losing growing space, when we are losing permeability, we're losing our sponginess and we're losing our ability for water to be absorbed, either through rainwater, through storms, or otherwise. So that's something that we certainly have a challenge with here. So, as I've noted, Toronto has tree protection bylaws. They protect trees on city streets, private trees, trees in parks, and then trees and natural features in our ravine and natural feature protection areas. As I've said, these bylaws regulate the removal and injury of trees. They regulate alteration of grades in ravines and natural areas. We also work with our colleagues in the Toronto and Region Conservation Authority, who also play a role here with their Conservation Authority regulation limit. And as I've noted, the bylaws require compensation trees to be planted in times when we are losing that canopy. The team was really excited that after about probably a year and a half of work, of public engagement, of stakeholder engagement, of Indigenous engagement, we brought a tree bylaw review report to Council. It went to Infrastructure and Environment Committee in February and then to Council in March. And we were able to achieve many things in that report. And we were very, very proud of those achievements. So a couple of highlights. One of the things in that report is that we looked at lowering the private tree bylaw size threshold. So right now, private tree bylaw protects trees that are 30 centimeters diameter at breast height. And we were able to achieve an endorsement from City Council in principle to lower to 20 centimeters diameter at breast height. This is more in alignment with the jurisdictional scan we did of other cities in Ontario. And we are coming back early next year with an implementation plan, and that would count for the resourcing and budget needs to do that. So it was one solid step forward in terms of lowering that, but we will be back and there will be another council decision on that early next year. There's a suite of improvements that were proposed for strengthening our contravention and enforcement program, as I noted. Some interesting things such as in a scenario where a tree was removed, my team did not have the evidence to show whether that tree was in fact by law protected. For example, 30 centimeters on private land. We were able to introduce a stump diameter to be used in cases in contravention cases. So if it's only the stump that is remaining, we can take a stump measurement to determine whether that was a bylaw protected tree. Of course, not helpful if the tree has also been stumped illegally before any evidence was collected, but it is, again, another step forward that we were pleased with. Distinctive tree definition and an incentive program. This is defined. Distinctive trees are now defined as healthy trees over 61 centimeters diameter at breast height. This is where I noted that even in as-of-right scenarios, we have council direction where staff may deny that tree removal in certain scenarios. And that is specifically related back to that size chart graphic that I showed at the beginning, showing that we have some work to do to hit the ideal size class for those larger trees. We also are piloting an incentive program. We know from engagement and we know from experience that tree maintenance is expensive, and we do not want that to be a barrier for a homeowner to take care of their trees. I have heard more than once that it would be less expensive for someone to remove a tree than it would be to prune it over its lifetime, and that's a terrible reason to remove a tree. So this is an incentive program that may add an incentive, maybe remove a barrier for a homeowner to be maintaining trees on their private property. And then the last one to point out, we've actually never charged application fees for tree applications in our ravine and natural feature protection limits. Simply put, it started as we wanted this to be an educational kind of experience, and we wanted to encourage people to apply. That would give my team an opportunity to help direct work that was happening in these sensitive natural areas, and also not penalize someone who maybe wants to do a stewardship project or remove invasive species, and get better outcomes for their properties. But we also note that it is really a bit of an inequity. You could live next door or across the street from a neighbor whose trees are not protected by the ravine and natural feature protection limit, and they have to pay an application fee. So it was a little bit of a right sizing. We maintained some of those exceptions so that, again, we are encouraging projects like stewardship work, low-income housing, development, etc. Okay, so let's get to the fun stuff. So Ellen asked me to speak and focus a little bit on our tree planting and stewardship programs. This is all in service of reaching City Council's direction that we should be increasing our tree canopy to 40% by 2050. As I noted at the beginning, right now in 2018, we have roughly a 28 to 31% canopy cover, so we have some ground to make up. So all of these programs are in service of that, informed by things like tree equity, our tree canopy study data, as well as where the opportunities are to expand Toronto's urban forest. So a couple of highlights here. In 2025, we planted over 130 native trees and shrubs on private and public property. We plant trees in residential, commercial, industrial areas, parks and ravines, all of those land use types you saw through our study where we have data on what's happening on that land. We have a very robust volunteer tree planting and stewardship program. Some are city-led and some are community-led. I think there's probably so many people on this call tonight who participate in one of our programs across the city. And I wanted to give a special shout out to Toronto Nature Stewards, who are leading a community-led program. We talked a little bit about their achievements in our recent ravine strategy update report. Toronto Nature Stewards lead a program on sites that are, and collectively, we all have common goals, and we're all contributing to some of those goals: removal of invasive species, increase of biodiversity, increase in tree canopy, and of course, just how we're all collectively offering a lot of engagement programs for people to get involved, and hands-on opportunities across the city. The last bullet here is about our grants and incentive program. So as I noted, knowing that our greatest potential to increase canopy is on private land, seeing how some of the city's other subsidy programs to incentivize action on private land, we introduced a grants and incentives program about, I think at this point, about 6 7 years ago. So we have free tree giveaways. Actually, they're active right now. You might see them in some of your local parks. We have grants for private land stewardship and canopy expansion as well. This is such an important part of our program to encourage where we can our influence to increase canopy on, as I said, private property, which makes up about 55% of the land coverage. Okay, I'm going to go through very quickly a couple of the key initiatives. So I started with one of our favorites, and certainly one of Toronto Field Naturalists' favorites, because we work together on this program. But prescribed grazing is a practice of using livestock to address a variety of ecosystem management goals. So we started this in 2024. We spearheaded a new initiative to bring 60 goats to graze a very large area of meadow habitat in the Don Valley Brickworks Park. That site was picked for a lot of reasons, not only natural reasons, but also logistics and infrastructure reasons as well. It's a great site where we can set up this pilot project. So we're so pleased to be working with Toronto Field Naturalists who lead the volunteer monitoring protocol, collecting some of that inventory data over time. So we've done this now 2 years in a row. Some of the positive early results that we've seen, and if for anyone who goes out and sees the goats, you can probably say firsthand that you know that buckthorn is their favorite. They are practically climbing those trees to get the leaves and the small twigs off of buckthorn. They also target willow and some poison ivy as well. Some of the monitoring showed that they do not, like most species, target common milkweed. And so that gives the opportunity in these meadows afterwards for this native species to grow. And this is just such a fun education and outreach opportunity. If you have not seen the goats, I'm sorry, I have to say this joke out loud because my number one goat staffer sent it. You heard it here first. The goats are coming back to Don Valley Brickworks June 9 and 10. And so if you've not seen them, please put it in your calendar. If you have, come and join us again. It's always a super fun day. I wanted to talk a little bit about the High Park traditional and prescribed burn. For those who don't know, although I'm sure you do, High Park is one of the largest parks that we have here in the city, and has so many wonderful things about it. But one of those things is about 23 hectares of remnant black oak savanna. It's a globally rare and threatened ecosystem that thrives on periodic fire to maintain its character, to keep down invasive species and to allow the native species to regenerate. Prior to European settlement, Indigenous communities were using traditional burn as a land management technique since time immemorial. Through colonization and settlement, the use of fire was suppressed, and we have seen these impacts on these natural areas. In a prescribed and Western approach, prescribed burns were reintroduced into this area about 20 years ago. So we've been doing that at High Park and some other sites around the city. But what's very unique about the last few years is our work with local Indigenous communities, so the Indigenous Land Stewardship Circle and the Turtle Protectors in particular at High Park, as well as Indigenous elders have been instrumental in reconnecting Indigenous ceremony, Indigenous celebration as part of the work that we do, and helping prescribe burn and the execution of the burn program in a much better way. So if you haven't seen that, you just missed it. It happened about 2.5 weeks ago. But it is generally an annual event. So stay tuned and look for that next year. We are partnering with the University of Toronto and other cities, such as Edmonton and Quebec City, on a biochar study. So, biochar is a charcoal derivative through biomass. So wood and other biomass, and it we're curious about how it can enhance soil quality, sequester carbon, and mitigate some greenhouse gas emissions. Thinking of the street trees and what we were talking about how, these are such a difficult growing environments, how we have challenges with soil quality and quantity. This is a study that we're particularly interested in to see if we have better outcomes. So some of the preliminary findings, we're seeing in an increase in tree growth. We're seeing improved photosynthetic outcomes, so higher nitrogen balances, higher chlorophyll, et cetera. And just to see how biochar, acts as a bio fertilizer to help maintain plant function, to help neutralize some of those acidic soils, to deal with some of the salinity and drought that we see in some of these environments as well. So we're grateful for the collaboration with the University of Toronto, and to continue to collaborate with some of our other municipal cities to see how this is improving street tree outcomes. Which leads us into our our tree survival study. Street trees being one of the programs that we're monitoring. But our strategic forest management plan noted back in 2012 that we should be conducting detailed surveys to understand how species react to certain growing conditions and how those growing conditions directly influence tree survival. So we've just finished a second study which evaluated over 6,600 trees. Only 8% of the 84,000 that were planted by this team in this 5-year period, but still a good subset. So some of the key findings of trees planted between 2018 and 2023. And again, some on streets, some in parks, some in our residential planting areas, and some in related to the different size and species of stock that we get. We found 91% of all assessed trees were rated in excellent or good condition. The overall survival in this program is estimated to be in the range of 92 to 95%. The top 5 species planted were honey locust, Kentucky coffee tree, Freeman maple, hackberry, and red oak. And you can see across these that the Freeman maple demonstrated the strongest overall, while honey locust ranked the lowest. So what this is informing for us is, again, as I said, growing conditions, what species are thriving and under what conditions. We have, of course, work by the tenet of planting the right tree in the right location for the right reason. But having data like this can really help inform value for money, what species are performing the best, but still being mindful of wanting species diversity across these different growing conditions as well. So these are good data points. What I wanted to relate it back to the tree canopy study that showed 75% of street trees were in excellent to good condition in 2018. And there I noted that it was a direct correlation with simply increasing our watering program. But these are all trees which have now had and been part of our newly planted tree maintenance program, which includes fertilizing, staking, annual mulching, as well as early pruning to get good structure and good form in these trees. And so having this data is very helpful, and again, is a direct correlation to the success and the value of putting money and resources into early tree maintenance. The last slide for a key initiative that I wanted to talk about was our tree seed diversity program with Forests Canada. This is a really incredible program. We were very nervous about it about 5 years ago because we had to go to council with a non-competitive report, which nobody likes. But really, at the time, and still, Forest Canada was the only organization that could mobilize and oversee a local seed collection program and a growing program across various nurseries. Seed sourced native trees, of course, is important for those on the call. We get a lot of our stock from commercial nurseries. A lot of that stock is grafted. A lot of it is not from our unique microclimate here in Toronto. So having seed collectors collecting various seeds from old growth trees already growing in Toronto is just so important for that genetic diversity and putting that back into our environmentally significant areas and our parks and natural areas. They also have turned an eye to climate and what is happening with our climate in this region, collecting some seeds outside of our current growing zone. For example, more south in Carolinian, we're growing that stock and we're starting to have a look to see how it is performing. So we're starting to tippy toe into what that might look like. Really important findings and data. So we're in the 5th year of our 10-year agreement. So it took time to collect, to grow, but the last few years we've started to plant these species back into Toronto's parks and natural areas, as I've said, as well as our environmentally significant areas. So by the end of this spring, we'll have planted 50,000 trees and shrubs that have been grown through this program. And again, just a note on that species diversity. This program has 17 different tree species and 19 different shrub species. And it's such a good partnership and program that we're really proud of. Okay, my last slide, and I'm going to give my voice a break. A couple of key takeaways I thought for tonight. We talked a lot of obviously about urbanization and about development and intensification pressures. We know that that has a direct negative impact on tree canopy and our ecological integrity. But I want folks to think about the fact that cities are also a major driver for all of the things that we do and why you're involved with Toronto Field Naturalists or maybe some of our own programs, which is about biodiversity conservation, about retaining, and promoting Toronto's tree canopy and natural areas. Our ravine system, our tree canopy, are critical green infrastructure. They're critical components of nature-based solutions, which is providing climate resiliency and all of the things that we talked about tonight around urban heat island, around loss of species diversity and invasive species. But they're just so critical to that. And just my last thought, I mean, a little bit of a call to action. Toronto Field Naturalists is such an incredible organization with lots of many other organizations who care, who Philip, right from your introduction, we all love trees. We all spend a significant amount of time in natural areas. All of our individual actions have cumulative impacts. So keep at it, keep volunteering, keep getting out into our natural areas. We'll see you down the trail. Keep doing your good work because it makes a difference and such a wonderful impact. So let's have some questions. Let's discuss. And for anyone who doesn't know me or how to reach me, there's a couple of ways to do that. Philip, Robert, if it makes sense, I could take this down so we can all see each other.
Sure, absolutely. Okay. And Kim, thank you so much for that presentation. Really excellent. What a great overview of what the city is doing. 92 to 95% survival rate on trees you've been planting. That's incredible. Really, really impressive. And congratulations on all the great work that your team is doing. And we're also thankful because we love our trees and spend a lot of time walking through them, sitting underneath them, and breathing cleaner air as a result. Why don't I start out with a question, and then there will be other questions that will come into the chat area. And Robert will be collecting those and will pose them to you. So here's my first question. Um, how will climate change and a warmer climate here affect our tree canopy? What kind of stresses are going to be on the
Mm.
trees? And is it even something that you can measure and do anything about? The Pacific is warming. We may have a super El Nino and a very, very hot fall and next year. Uh,
Mhm.
what's uh, what's your team's view of how all this is going to play out in the future?
So I think in a couple of ways. So to start off, I think a lot about the um, warmer winters, our longer growing seasons, and that impact on our existing as well as our invasive forest pests. So some of the insects that we're looking at now and that we work in the with our colleagues in the industry to keep an eye on. So things like and think about all of the different sweeps of insects that have come through this area. Again, not we're not unique. They sweep through a lot of areas, but in Toronto, Dutch elm disease, Asian longhorn beetle, emerald ash borer. We're looking now at and monitoring for oak wilt, which is a fungus, and one of seven reasons of things that keep me up at night. But these are the kinds of things that we need to monitor because they do have impacts, of course, to canopies, either species specific, and if we didn't learn our lesson the first time by planting elm as a monoculture on our streets and then all swept through with Dutch elm disease. We did it again with ash. And then all of that is impacted when emerald ash borer sweeps through. So that's why we keep an eye on species diversity and wanting to make sure that we have good component of different native trees and shrubs. Um, as well as the again the extremes, so droughts and floods. How do trees fare through times like that? And I think, as I noted, looking to the research, looking to the academics, and then realizing that through a program like the one we have with Forests Canada of growing species that are currently outside of or we're just on the edge of that growing zone. When should we start thinking about planting species that are not native to currently to this area, but might be in decades to come? What does that look like? Can we to some degree. Now, I wouldn't suggest that we would get ahead of it, but certainly some learnings on how different species may survive here. Um, and then I think the last way that I look at it is again like thinking of spongy cities, thinking of urban nature, incorporating it into our design. New developments, growing space around infill, all of these things that we can do either as individuals or as a city who provide the policies and the requirements for things like development and intensification, where we can incorporate nature into every day. We can build that connection with younger generations, or older generations, medium generations, in terms of keeping that connection, which is just so important. If people aren't living with it, caring about it, we won't see that this is important to people moving forward. And so I think that has it's a bit of an indirect, but so critical to be developing nature literate communities in urban areas.
Oh, great. Thanks very much, Kim. That's a really excellent response. Robert, over to you in terms of some of the questions that are coming forward.
Sure. I've got a couple in the chat. I have one of my own. And I noticed, Sherry, you've turned your camera on. Is that because you want to ask a question live? No? Okay. So I'll go to the questions in the chat and save mine for the end here. The first one is, what is the aim of the early pruning of trees and the planting? And is that program more in the parks or is it also on the streets?
So the aim of early pruning is that it's easier to address any structural issues. Trees are living beings. They come out of the nursery. We have really good standards now for the stock that we will accept from nurseries. I think that also has had a key impact on our survival as well. But early pruning, when you can do it from the ground, when the tree is young, you're encouraging that good structure of that tree growth over time. You're not waiting for it until it's 20 years and you might have some structural issues because tree branches have grown in a way that is maybe not ideal. And that newly planted tree maintenance program is for every tree that we plant, regardless of whether it's on a street or a park. We do have as well with some of our contracts like a warranty period. So either with our suppliers or even through developments as well, we do seek a warranty program so that we make sure that the maintenance is happening, that before, for example, on a private development for street trees, before that tree becomes a city asset, after, for example, a 2-year warranty period, that tree is healthy, that we're accepting a healthy asset. If it is not, if it is dying, dead, we have we have a warranty program where those trees need to be replaced, and that time frame starts again. So really important, not only from a effective use of budgets, but also just to make sure that that trees are getting off on the right start from the time they've been planted.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Next question I've got here is, how does the city assist residences who manage the municipal trees on their property by watering, fertilizing, fruit pruning, etc.?
Robert, can you read me that one again?
How does the city assist? It says residences. I suspect it meant residents who manage the municipal trees on their properties.
So for private trees, I'll just be specific about the language so I don't cause any confusion. So trees on private property are assets of and responsibility of the property or the homeowner. So the distinctive tree program is one new program that we're going to be piloting specifically for maintenance costs. We're developing the criteria for that program. We hope to have it up and running by the end of this year, and we'll be piloting for a year to see, is there uptake? Were we correct that there is a need and an interest for that program as well? If we're talking about trees that are adjacent to homes, so on the street right of way, those are city-owned and maintained trees. So again, we might have a newly planted tree maintenance program if it was a new tree. If it's an existing or older tree, then my colleagues in forestry operations have both a proactive and a reactive tree maintenance program for those. What you might see is certainly after a tree's been planted, or in times of drought, which we just talked about, we're going to have these swings in our weather patterns. We may have communication campaigns where we ask people to help by watering the city-owned tree, adjacent to their property. We also partner with great organizations that can provide advice, support, and also in some cases some subsidies as well. So I'll give a shout out to LEAF. That is an acronym for Local Enhancement and Appreciation of Forests, who have a great backyard tree planting program, education program, and as I said, some of that is subsidized depending on where you live as well. Last thing, if you're looking for a tree, come out to one of our free tree giveaways or have a look at our grants and incentive program, toronto.ca/trees. You can probably navigate through the bar there to find out about that as well. So you might be able to get a free tree for your property, and one day we might be able to subsidize the maintenance of that tree when it gets big enough.
Cool. Actually, I've got another question in the chat, but I'm going to ask my question because it ties into kind of what you were just saying. It's part of the planting program that the city does. Is one of the factors that's in the decision around what species, obviously you want biodiversity, are we looking at a mix of natural longevity, like some trees just live longer than others, Is that a factor in the decision process? And related to that,
Yep.
and I don't know if this is still true, but a few years back there was a lot of chatter around the excess of male trees being planted, which
Mm.
meant higher pollen, which meant more allergy suffering. Is it true? And B, is it still an issue, or is it something we're working to balance out?
So to the first part about species choice, in an ideal scenario, we have the space, the soil quality, soil quantity to plant all large native shade trees. So in along streets where you're going to feel the hottest, you'll have the highest kind of urban heat effect. We want to create shade. We want to create habitat for pollinators and wildlife. We always would have a preference to pick large growing native shade trees. Not an ideal world, not an ideal growing scenarios in lots of cases. And so that's when we turn our mind to what trees, really show the most urban resilience to these really tough growing conditions. And why we focused on a couple of those species for the survival study. I know a lot. This is not a dig, although it was about to sound like one. But I was going to say I know a lot of landscape architects who love honey locust, who love the dapple shade, who love leaves that can quickly be blown around with leaf blowers and things. Do they survive? Well, yes, they do. Do they have a lot of diseases? Actually, yes, they do as well. Um, but but sometimes that might make sense if it's a really harsh growing environment, as we saw. It didn't perform. The honey locust did not perform the best, but it is a reliable, urban type tree. So those are a lot of the factors that my team would consider with those planting lists. But as I said, it's the right tree in the right location for the right reason. We do not plant invasive species. We prefer not to plant, well, we don't plant sorry, I should word that in a different way. We don't prioritize non-native, but we would rely on hybrids, where we know that they, again, are a good urban tree to grow. Robert, you asked about male species and allergies and things like that. The first example that came to mind, and this is so interesting to me and something we've been talking a lot about, is ginkgo, and kind of a nursery preference. Ginkgo is non-native. It's not invasive, but is non-native to Toronto. It is a fantastic urban tree. They grow so well. They perform very nicely. Female ginkgos, this is one of a tree that's dioecious. So they actually have male and female forms. And so females produce a lot of fruit. And for anyone who has one, who lives near one, you may have experienced as that fruit falls and rots and decomposes. It's a very horrible smell. And so the industry, the nurseries started producing male ginkgos, and that is what a lot of municipalities used for their planting programs. We started seeing something kind of interesting where 15, 20-year-old trees who never produced fruit a season in their life are now producing fruit. They have switched. And this is fascinating because the benefit of many benefits of being on a board of directors with at the International Society of Arboriculture is I have access to a lot of people where I can say, have you experienced this? What are you seeing in your municipalities or where you work? And I've actually heard from a few other folks that they're starting to see this in their municipalities as well. And so not good research yet, but I'm very curious around why is this happening? Were they actually females, but we thought nursery thought they were male. We were planting females all along. Is that what's happening? Does climate change? Is there something to do with change in climate that has the tree has switched and is starting to produce fruit? Here's the wildest idea, and again, no research behind this, but something that we're very curious about is the overproliferation of planting males, is this a nature's reaction to we're not reproducing naturally? We need female species. And is there any kind of spontaneous thing that is happening there? So none of that is validated. Please don't take that as any reason, but take that as my my past science brain thinking, what's this hypothesis here, and who can we get to work on this research project? Because this is pretty fascinating of human intent versus nature at its best.
That's not an answer I was expecting, but thank you very much. I've got two more questions here in the chat. One is, how do you encourage tree planting on industrial areas, golf courses, and cemeteries? And I'll let you do that one now, and one short one after that.
Sure. So through our grants and incentives program, we would offer subsidies, grants to some of these landowners. We have a great I can think of a couple of great projects. So one at Sunnybrook Hospital Complex, where we've been contributing funding for them to expand their arboretum. So some super interesting species that they're trying out there, including lots of my team who got super excited about pawpaw, but also just to support and expand what they want to do on that campus, related to the role of nature in helping healing, with folks there at Sunnybrook. Also a great program with Seneca College, so other institutional lands as well. So to help them expand out, incorporating urban nature on their campuses, and again, that connection between students and access to nature. I can think of a couple of great cemeteries in town that also are very proud and take great care of their trees.
Wow.
So not necessarily in how do we encourage tree planting, but certainly I know lots of examples where they're doing that on their own and have great forest management plans for cemeteries, and really also acting, like arboretums with incredibly old and interesting species as well.
All
So
right.
one more question, Robert.
Yep. This last one is, could you suggest a few native shrubs and possibly the decision point around trees versus shrubs?
So a couple of native shrubs that I love, that I have on my very small property. A couple of obvious ones. I love alternate leaf dogwood, in terms of providing, and red osier dogwood for that matter, for providing kind of 4-season interest. Great native shrub for wildlife and pollinators as well. Early flowering, really beautiful. And as I said, each season there's something uniquely beautiful. I love witch hazel. They grow a little bit happier with some shade, but the flowers and leaf pattern on those are amazing. I also was just looking out my window today because my serviceberry is in full bloom. It's just perfect. It's like just at that space and in its growth. And I was really hoping, I know there's a lot of rain in the forecast. I'm really hoping it's no downpour, because it certainly will make that flowering season a little shorter. But I have not attracted any cedar waxwing, but when I worked out of the Don Valley Brickworks, there was a line of serviceberry on the driveway on the way in that were just covered in cedar waxwings all spring, once the berries ripened. And it's so neat for me just to walk up my walkway, grab a handful of fruit and walk in the door. And my neighbors always, lots of reasons why they think I'm a little quirky, but eating the fruit off of my very own shrub out front is such a delight. In terms of when you might pick shrubs over trees, again, it's the right tree for the in the right location. So you would have considerations about space. You would have considerations about adjacency to a house. Again, what you want to achieve. so many good options. Whether you want a tree because maybe that's for shade, maybe you want shrubs then again for fruit or for winter interest, for food as well. So lots of interesting considerations there.
Great. Well, I think we need to conclude our session. And Kim, I want to thank you not only for your knowledge and your experience, but also your enthusiasm, which comes across so well. And it gives us a great deal of optimism that the city is addressing trees in such a comprehensive and scientific way. So thank you so much for your presentation and best of luck. And TFN looks forward to working with urban forestry in the future on various projects. So we'll see you in the future.
We'll see you down the trail. Thanks, Philip. Thanks, Robert.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Cam.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.